Hello, everyone, and welcome to More Than Coincidence, Remembering Jesus Christ in Your Story. As the author and finisher of our faith, our Savior writes personal experiences into each of our lives, which can later strengthen, empower, and bring us peace upon reflection. This podcast is dedicated to sharing these anchoring memories from everyone's unique stories in order to collectively remember and testify of the reality of Jesus Christ and His presence in our lives. I'm your host, Lily, and I'm very excited to share these experiences together. All right, so good evening, everybody. Tonight on the podcast, we have David. How you doing?
Good. How about you?
Fantastic. We just caught up a little bit, got to know each other, and now I'm really excited to share your story. Would you mind introducing yourself to everybody?
Yeah. So my name is David. I was born in Mexico City, but then I moved to California when I was 10 years old. And then I moved to Utah when I was 21 or 20 actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been here since 2003. So I guess I'm more Utah than California now. So married, been married for 16 years, going on 17.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have a daughter who is turning 12 next week, actually. So
Almost
yeah,
teenager. How you
almost,
feeling about
yeah,
that?
preteen. It's a little nerve-wracking because she's starting to, like she wants all that, but she's always been very independent to begin with.
Yeah.
But now even more so, like she wants to hang out with friends and she wants to go ride her bike all over the place and she wants to go by herself everywhere. And
Right.
so yeah, that's it's an interesting switch. And yeah, it's just great. We live here in Utah, and I work for a great company named Visa,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, is I love shoes. That's kind of my and
Oh, really?
yeah, I'm addicted to buying sneakers. Like I have so many tennis shoes, and yeah, it's an
Do you
addiction.
wear them all, or do you just
Yeah,
display them?
no,
How
oh
how does
no,
how does it go with sneakers?
oh no, I wear them. I
Uh-huh.
wear my shoes. I don't spend money to not to wear them. I may not wear them all the time, but
Yeah.
so
What's your
yeah.
favorite pair that you have, or your favorite brand? Do you have one?
So I'm a sucker for Jordans. So
Uh-huh.
like the old school Jordans, they're called retros,
Yeah.
and just Yeezys. Like kind of like the hard to find shoe. Like that's
Right.
that's the kind of shoe that I lean towards.
Uh-huh.
It's weird. My shoes are very ostentatious. They're very bright. And
Right. Uh-huh.
yeah, and so sometimes I wear shoes that are super colorful, and people are like, "What are you wearing?" So
So
yeah.
is that what usually attracts you? You're like a moth to flame. You're like, "Ooh, those colors."
It depends. It depends on the style of the shoe. Like if it's
Mm-hmm.
a shoe that I like the silhouette is what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like to go for the crazy colors. Um,
Cool.
but but yeah, shoes are that's my vice. And I love music.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm 41 years old, which is crazy because I still feel like a 20-year-old. Uh,
Right. You're young mentally, which is great.
Yes, yes. So yeah, life is just crazy because, 1 minute you're young, and the next minute you're 41 years old and you're throwing your back out mowing your lawn, which actually
Right.
happened. So
Oh
yeah,
no. Your age is caught up to you.
yes, no, it's no joke. Like once you turn 40, well, I say that once you get into your 30s,
Yeah.
things start to hurt, and
That's my
then once
husband. He's like 32 and he's like, "Oh,
yeah.
why do I ache so
Yeah.
much?"
And then once you turn 40,
Uh-huh.
like that's when things start really going
You're
downhill. Like,
actually over the hill. They
yeah.
say it's 50, but it's
Yeah.
actually 40.
No, no. And I work out like almost daily. Like I
Uh,
take one day off a week
uh,
and still like, my body is constantly sore. So
yeah.
yeah, it's the age, man.
Age is a thing, man. Thank heavens for the resurrection. We'll be like,
Right?
boom. Don't
Yep.
have to worry about that anymore.
Perfect body, six pack,
For
like just
reals. That's awesome. Well, I'm
yeah.
I'm so grateful for you coming tonight and sharing your story. So I'll ask you the question, what memories do you reflect on that prick your heart in remembrance of our Savior Jesus Christ and anchor you to him?
Okay. So it's kind of a long story. And
We like long stories. It's okay.
thanks. Um, I think so I don't want to say like it's just one thing. I think to me like the topic or the theme of my life so far has been the atonement.
Mhm.
Um, just because of how I've seen it affect my life, and how the gospel has affected my life. How
Right.
I went from one extreme end in life and to another.
Mhm.
So I mean I think that's the center. That's at the center of my story is the atonement. I
Wonderful.
like Obviously I'm not going to compare myself to Alma the Younger, but that is one story. Alma the Younger and Ammon are, the two characters that I relate to the most because,
Mhm.
in the Book of Mormon it says that they were the vilest of sinners.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and I I feel like I was one of those people.
Mhm.
Um, but through the atonement of Christ and the gospel and a lot of key figures in my life, a lot of great individuals, I
Mhm.
was able to turn my life around. And so much so that if you were, if maybe 19-year-old me could see 40-year-old me or
Yeah.
41-year-old me, he'd probably laugh and point and say, there's no way that you're this person.
That we're the
So,
same. Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, a drastically different person, individual. So, um, I guess let's start at the beginning. Like I said, I was born in Mexico City,
Mhm.
and we lived in Mexico till I was 10 years old, so 1993.
Mhm.
Um, to give you a little bit of background, my mom, she was a convert, but when she was little, like when her dad became a member of the church, and they were converted, obviously. And so when my mom was young, she married a man, and she had 3 kids. She had my 2 brothers and my sister.
Mhm.
My dad knew my mom when they were young, because her brother was my dad's best friend growing up.
Well, there you go.
They knew each other when they were young, yeah,
Yeah.
and, um, there was sparks were there, but
Uh-huh.
they never got together.
Uh-huh.
He ended up marrying someone else as well, and he had my other sister and my other brother, um, and so they went different ways, right? My
Right.
dad was a staunch Catholic, like straight
Yeah.
Catholic, you know,
Uh-huh.
and so at that time, my mom, she had a really rough marriage. Her husband back then used to beat her and my brothers,
Right.
and very abusive. My dad, on the other hand, he also had a rough marriage. His wife was a little cuckoo, and
Mhm.
to get really dark here, she committed suicide,
Yeah.
and she tried to actually uh, kill my brother and my sister with her.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that really, obviously, she didn't succeed with that. She did end up dying, but she didn't. My
Mhm.
my brother and sister didn't. That put my dad in a really deep depression. Um, so he started going to a doctor, and he took to the bottle, like, he started drinking. Him and my mom eventually kinda connected again, because my mom ended up leaving her other husband,
Right.
and, so they connected, and they eventually got married, and
Mhm.
so they kinda became like the Brady Bunch. Uh,
Yeah.
so
All of these children and all of
Yep,
these children.
yep. So he had 2 and my mom had 3,
Yeah.
and they got together, and, her and my dad had my sister and then me. I was the last child,
Uh-huh.
and I was
Aw, the
actually.
baby of the
Yep, the
family.
baby of the family, yep, and, I was not planned is what they say, um, but I never met my dad this way. Like, they tell me that he used to drink a lot, like, he used to be an
Mhm.
alcoholic.
Right.
My mom would have to drive him to work, and it was kind of a hectic life for them, and he didn't
Right.
want her to go to church because she wanted to get back into the church because she was really not active at all.
Yeah.
Um, so for the longest time, she didn't go to church. I was born. My dad at that time was told that, if he drank again, he would end up dying. Like, it was so
Oh,
bad. Like,
wow.
his drinking was affecting his body so bad.
Right.
So to cope with all the stress and all the issues he had left from his ex-wife committing suicide, he took
Mhm.
running. Like, he took to running. Like, that was his
Yeah.
that was his outlet.
Right.
So when I was born, and like my recollection, my dad never drank. Like I never met that man. Um,
Mhm.
he was just always active, very healthy person.
Right.
And eventually, my mom started kind of getting back into the church,
Mhm.
and her parents, very, straight and narrow people. They
Mhm.
served the mission in the Mexico City Temple, and
Mhm.
uh, all this was happening in the early 90s, like late 80s, early 90s. My dad eventually got baptized, but I don't think he did it for the right reasons. Uh, I do remember a little bit of time in my life when I was younger where he would go to church with us. I remember him paying tithing. I recall him paying some tithing, which was cool, but I
Right.
never really had that in my life. Like
Right.
none of my siblings were active. I never had a priesthood holder in my home. Like I
Mhm.
never had a blessing. I never, we never said prayers.
Right.
We never did
Right.
that. And so when my mom tried to like take us to church, I remember being little, probably like around 5 or 6, and
Yeah.
me not wanting to go to church. I just never, some kids grow up and they automatically cling to the gospel or God, and they're, all that.
Yeah.
I never did. I
Well, and it's
remember,
exposure too. So if
yeah,
you're not like as exposed to it, you're just like,
exactly.
why would I go and hang out with random
Yes.
strangers and sing these songs that I have no idea
Yes.
what's happening?
Exactly. And
Snowmen, popcorn, I don't understand what's happening.
yeah. And and when you have a parent who doesn't believe that or doesn't like to be part of that, and you
Right.
have another one who's like trying to fight it, but it's kind of like it's a losing battle.
Yeah,
So
and
to
it's a
keep the peace at
contentious
home,
topic, so you're kind of like,
yes,
is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Like as a small child,
yes,
you don't understand.
exactly. So to keep the peace at home, my mom just kind of she just left it alone.
Yeah.
So like I said, wasn't really active. Eventually, one of my older brothers, moved to California. And then all my some of my siblings followed.
Hmm.
And then in '92, we wanted to visit California. Like we went there for the summer. My sister, who's 5 years older than me,
Hmm.
my mom, and my other sister, who's I want to say like 10 years older than me. And we went to California, and my brother was trying to convince my mom to stay. He was like, there's no future in Mexico for you and the
Yeah.
kids. Like, you guys will be better off here.
Right.
My dad, and I'm not saying that my dad was a horrible individual. He was not. He was a great dad. He loved us. He made a lot of mistakes in life, and at the time, my dad had an affair, and like my mom and him weren't really together. So there really wasn't anything for my mom to have here or to have in Mexico, or to leave in Mexico. So we ended up going back to Mexico to get all of our stuff together.
Hmm.
And then in '93, I remember it was October of '93, we moved to California.
Right.
Like I said, I was 10 years old. They totally just uprooted me from everything I knew, and they took us to California. It was Southern California, a town called Lancaster. Um, and it was just such a culture shock. Like here you have this little 10-year-old kid, and
Yep. Did you speak
you
any English?
no, no, we didn't.
Yeah.
And but it was cool though, because it was a great change for me, because
Hmm.
living in Mexico, I had no friends. We lived in a really like busy area.
Hmm.
So I really wasn't allowed to go out because of how much traffic there is in Mexico City. Traffic is insane.
Is it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And so I went from not going out as much and being glued to a TV and to video games,
Right.
to coming to California and really just like
The perfect
just
weather,
yeah, like
Disney, the
yes,
beach really
yes.
close.
And so yeah, it was crazy for me to like, oh, I have friends. Like, oh, I can go to the park, I can ride my bike. Like I didn't know how to
Wow.
throw a ball. Like I never did any of those things. So
Right.
when we moved to California, like, and I met friends, and I started doing the things that normal kids do.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's a
and
big deal.
yeah, it was huge, and my mom loved it. She saw the big change in me, and my brother, he's my older brother. He's been my father figure for most of my life, because my dad stayed in Mexico. He loved us, but he just he just couldn't leave his life in, Mexico. And so when we moved to California, again, we still weren't really active. My mom tried here, there a little bit, but nothing really stuck. Um, and life just kind of went on. I got older. I learned English in 3 months. I actually got a diploma for it.
Oh my
So
gosh, that's incredible.
yeah, well, when you're little, things just,
Yeah, you
you're
just absorb
constantly,
it.
yeah, you observe it, you listen to, you watch TV, you listen to music in English, and the only
Right.
time I spoke Spanish was at home. So,
Right.
and then I had really good teachers that, wanted to teach me English. So
Hmm.
it was great. And so yeah, time went on, and I got into high school, and I just was not hanging out with the right people. I was just making really dumb decisions. I got into drinking, I got into smoking. Like I said, not having the gospel being a center of your life. I see it as a father now, and
Hmm.
just having a priesthood holder at home, somebody that can say, hey, this is what you should be doing. And I did have that with my brother,
Yeah.
but it wasn't gospel centered. It was more of like live experiences,
Experience.
yes.
Right.
And I my brother is like my dad to me,
Yeah.
because of that. He taught me a lot, but again, with him not having the gospel in his life either, like it was those things were not
It was
were
more like don't make the mistakes I have than like these
yes.
are the principles.
Yes. Yeah, street smarts, like,
Yeah.
those type of things, like, "Hey, I want you to be better." Like, you have a better way, you have a better, shot at having a good life if you don't do this, or if you don't do that, or if you don't hang out with these people. But,
Right. Or even like the
the
eternal perspective of like, why
yes,
would you want to do this? Right.
right.
Like, what
Yeah,
things for the future could this bring you? Than the short
exactly,
term gratification, right? Which
exactly.
is hard to think of, as a teenager.
Yes. Well, yeah, and again, like I never had those conversations. Like I see people now that have kids. I don't have a boy of my own, but
Hmm.
my best friend has kids, boys, and I see my friends with their teenagers, and
Right.
have being able to have a conversation and say, hey, you know what, like you shouldn't have sex until you get married, or you shouldn't watch pornography, you
Hmm.
shouldn't drink, you shouldn't smoke. Aside from like the things that the world teaches you, obviously we
Right.
know that drinking and smoking is not good for you, but
Right.
um having a gospel centered perspective at home, and somebody to tell you these things,
Hmm.
it's just different, especially as a young man.
Yeah.
'Cause, I don't know, I hate to sound dated, but it's different to hear from my mom.
Right.
You just feel like, "Oh, you're just nagging me, like, stop."
Right. Well, but I feel like men have a special connection.
Yes.
Because I see that with my husband and his and our son
Yeah.
too. Like they just connect on different ways that I
Yes.
can't connect with him. And I've seen that
Right.
with, my dad and my brothers, right?
Exactly.
Men just connect differently. Women
Right.
connect differently. It's just
Exactly.
what it is.
Yes. It's like it's like me trying to teach my daughter how to be a woman. Obviously, I'll have good perspective and to tell her things, but, my
Right.
wife,
That's
that's her
her
bread and butter, right?
wheelhouse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just not having that really affected me. So, like I said, I don't want to say I didn't get heavy into drugs, thankfully. I don't have
Hmm.
an addictive personality, but I did, like I smoked weed, and I smoked, and I drank at parties, got drunk, and
Yeah.
hung out with really not the best people. Good friends, but again, people who didn't have kind of like a structure at home either.
Right.
So we got into a lot of trouble. We got into some crazy situations,
Yeah.
um, and there's so many times where I could have been arrested, I could have been killed, I could have been, just
Yeah.
really put myself in stupid situations. Um, but for one reason or another, obviously at the time you don't really realize it until you're older. Nothing
Yeah.
happened, nothing came of it. I remember one time a couple of friends and we jumped a fence, and there was like a tree of peaches, and right behind the fence there was like this street where just cars would come by, and I remember a motorcycle was driving by, and we are throwing peaches at people. and that motorcycle happened to have a little kid in the back. And so we threw a peach at them, and the guy got hit in the helmet, and he almost fell with the kid, and like he started chasing us, and
Yeah.
one of my friends ended up going to jail for that. And but they didn't catch everybody. They only caught one person. So, and
Right.
that guy didn't rat us out or anything like that. But those are the kind of situations. I mean, they
That you're
seem
like, wow, that was kind
right.
of
Yes.
that's not a coincidence. I was
No.
like, I should have gone to jail.
And it didn't click in my head as to why those things happen until I
Right.
was older. And I'll get to that. Um, so I mean, it's just like the way that life kind of comes full circle at times. It's a little crazy. And again, living in a household where hey, you're good to watch pornography, you're good to do that, you're good to have sex, you're good to do these things, just be safe, be like,
Right.
just know that if you mess up, like, you're gonna be kind of held accountable for your actions. It was that kind of
Right.
mentality. um and that was just the norm in my household. Like, when I met my wife, I had a mouth on me, like I cussed like a sailor, and
Right.
just all these old habits that I just never thought were bad. Like, I just that was just the norm. Like, that was just, all my friends were like that, all my siblings were like that. So um fast forward, 2001, I graduated high school. Around that time, my dad started getting sick, and he got cancer. Uh, yeah, in 2002, he passed away, and that was really rough. I couldn't go see him because he was in Mexico.
Right.
And at the time, I wasn't even legally here. I was actually, so I came from Mexico with a like a traveling visa, like a tourist visa. And then once that visa and passport expired, we stayed here. Um, and so I couldn't go to Mexico to see my dad, so I never got to see him. I got to
Yeah.
talk to him. Last time I got to talk to him, he was pretty delirious.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like I said, he was baptized, but I don't think that he ever really, you know, fully accepted the gospel at the time.
Right.
Um, and a lot of things were happening in my life where I felt like I needed to change, but I really wasn't willing to do it. I was kind of scared to do it.
Mhm.
I had some cousins that moved from Cancun to Utah, and they came to visit us. And one of them said he was a return missionary,
Uh-huh.
and
It's always the
he
RMs that
yeah, it's
get you.
always the RMs, he was like, "Hey, man, you should really think about moving to Utah, man. Like, there's so many more opportunities. It's a lot easier for you
Right.
to go to school out there. It's a lot cheaper, cost of
Right.
living. That's not the case anymore, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, not
uh,
anymore.
and I was like, yeah, I'll think about it. I wasn't doing anything with my life. I was, like I said,
Yeah.
high school graduate. I was working at like Wendy's and McDonald's and Subway. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that, but like, I had no path in my life. I wanted to be a rapper. I mean, so that
Yeah.
tells you anything. Like, that's who I hung out with. Um, and the funny thing is that one of the friends that I used to hang out with, later on, I found out when I lived here in Utah. Later on, he ended up going to prison because
Yeah.
he was involved in the murder of his mother-in-law for money. So, and they were investigated, and there were pictures of us. Like, I was in some of the pictures when they
Yeah,
were
so
taking
thankfully
out
you
the
didn't have
house.
a connection.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so many things that happened in my life where I could have really been in really bad in a bad
Right.
situation. Just
Right.
I was able to kind of get away from those things.
Right. So I just
Um,
had this, I don't mind if you don't mind me asking
oh
this question.
yes, please.
I just had this thought. So what inside you was really like something doesn't feel right, but I don't know what it is, but I want to change, but I don't know how to like can you like
Yeah.
dive into that a little bit?
So I mean, at the time, I didn't credit the spirit because I didn't believe in it. Like, I believed
Right.
in God, but I didn't really have the idea or the notion of, like, oh yeah, the Holy Ghost is with me.
Yeah, right.
So it was a combination of things. It was me being frustrated with life and just working dead end jobs, not really getting anywhere,
Right.
and constantly getting fired from from jobs because I didn't have papers. I couldn't work legally in the United States.
Yeah.
So it was just it was all of that mixed with my desire to be something and someone in life. And I think a lot of that has to do with me being an immigrant. You know,
Right.
the immigrant mindset is, you know, you leave your country of origin to come to this country to make it.
Right.
And, you know,
And
you're
especially if you're in America, it's like
yes,
like the American dream. Like this is
exactly.
where you make it.
Yes. And you know, my family, my mom, my brothers having sacrificed so much to kind of put us in a situation where we could be better, be more.
Yeah.
It was that drive that kind of like helped me a little bit, but again, it was still the I don't want to leave my friends, you know,
Yeah.
people that I've known for 10 years. And
Right.
again, my brother comes into the picture. He's always kind of been the one steering me away from the bad situations
Right.
and putting me in a good path. And he told me, he said, "Hey, you know, really should think about going to Utah. Like, I think it'd be a good change for you."
Yeah.
And at the time, you know, I was so young and naive and just so guided by him. And I was just like, "Oh, you think so? Okay, let's do it."
Let's do
So yeah,
it.
you know, he would tell me like jump, and I would say how high. You know, so
Yeah.
when he said it, it was kind of like the okay for me to do it.
Cool.
So in 2003, I left California and I moved here to Utah when
Yeah.
I moved in with my aunt and her sons, my cousins. And you know, I'll be honest, things didn't change. I was still party mode. I was still, you know, like
Right.
this hooligan who thought he was gonna make it big in rap, and I was I was still going to clubs. I was still getting high and getting drunk and
Yeah.
you know, girls and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And um work, you know, same thing. Dead end jobs. I kept getting laid off, you know, fired because my papers didn't match, etc. It's just the
Yep.
typical situation.
Yep.
I was just far away from my family and everyone I knew. And I didn't have the beach near me, and the weather sucked. And
The snow is
so
pretty awful,
yes.
isn't it?
Well, it's cool when you move from California, you know, your
Uh-huh.
winters are like, you know, 60 degrees.
Perfect.
And yeah, and you get like rain, you know, at
Yeah.
best. And then you move to Utah and it's like snowing. And like the first time it's like, oh my gosh,
It's
it's awesome.
magic. Yeah.
But then it doesn't stop.
Yeah. And
And
it's
you
cold
can't
and it's
drive in it.
depressing.
Yes.
It's yeah,
Yes.
the snow's
And it's
not my
scary to
favorite.
no, it's scary to drive in. And anyway, so I was to the point where I told my aunt, I said, you know what, I'm gonna move back because you know everything that I came for is really not nothing new is happening, and I'm away from my family. I
Hmm.
don't have any of my friends. So my aunt looked at me and said, "Okay, tell you what, just give it 3 more months, and in 3 months things don't change, I'll drive you down there. I'll drive you myself."
Hmm.
So I said, "Okay." So 3 more months. So let's stick it out. In those 3 months, I got a job at a call center, which is dialogue marketing.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I met a guy at this job. Um, I just turned 21. We just came back from Vegas because, you know, 21, you have to go to
You
Vegas.
have to, right.
You have to. You can legally drink and all these things.
Right.
So I come back from Vegas and I'm thinking, like, this job's not going to last. They're going to fire me because of my papers and all that.
Right.
7 years later, I'm still there. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I right at the beginning, I want to say maybe like 3 or 4 months into me turning 21, I'm sitting around at the call center and there's a guy sitting down, another RM, um, and there's a discussion going on with the people around him, and they're talking about the church. Um, Now I had this preconceived notion of the church. Growing up, I didn't have the best view of members of the church. I felt like people were hypocrites, and
Right.
you know, like I just didn't have a good vision of the members of the church, so I didn't want anything to do with the church. Um, and I don't remember exactly what was being talked about, what the topic was, but I remember seeing my this guy. His name is Jordan,
Hmm.
and he was just sitting there listening to what everybody was saying, and they were doing a lot of church bashing, and he was just quiet. And then somebody said something specifically to where he he chimed in. He said, "Okay, like I'm not against people talking bad about the church. Like
Right.
everybody has their own opinion, but if you're gonna do it, you got to do it right." Like, and so he started talking about whatever. Again, I don't remember exactly what the topic was,
Yeah.
but I didn't say anything. Like I was just sitting there listening, and I remember him saying these things, and obviously now I know that it was the spirit.
Hmm.
Something just in me just kind of like my mind just kind of like cleared up, and I was just like, wait a minute, like that's not true.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, like I've known about the church my whole life,
Right.
but I've never heard someone explain aspects of the church in such a way that it just kind of clicked in my head.
Mhm. So he was defending the
He was
church.
defending the church,
Okay.
and again, 21 years, I've always had this notion of the church. It's just
Right.
another religion that wants to control people, and tithing
Right.
is bad,
Right.
and then here's this return missionary, 20 years old, and he's talking, and just he's just speaking truth, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
no way, like there is no way, this guy must be joking, right?
Yeah.
So after the conversation's over, um we walk away, our shift was over, and I went up to him and I asked him, I said, hey, everything that you just said, like, is that true? Like, are you like making things up to make things better? And he was just
Right.
like, he's like, I mean, it's all in the Book of Mormon, and
Yeah.
and I was like, I've been a member my whole life. I was baptized by my dad, who again, I don't believe he had an actual testimony of the church when
Right.
I was like 11 or 12. Um, and I'm like, I've never heard the gospel explained that way. And it's never really resonated until just now. And so,
Wow.
I mean, obviously, having been a return missionary, he was just like, oh, golden member right here. Let me talk to you a little bit about this. And
Yeah.
he starts talking to me about it. And he's just like, look, I don't want to overwhelm you.
Right.
He said, tell you what, let me invite you to church. He was going to BYU. He was teaching Sunday school that
Hmm.
Sunday or the following Sunday, I don't remember. But he said, "Come, listen to what I have to say, and if anything, you can just walk away knowing that you gave it a try."
Right. Right.
So I'm like, "All right, sounds good." I mean, I honestly, in the back of my mind, I was like, "This sounds cool, but nothing's gonna come from it. I don't really want religion in my life."
Right.
At the time, my cousin, the one that told me to move here, he was just like, "Hey, like you should try the church and give the church a try." And
Right.
again, I was like, I don't want to, I don't want to. But then with this happening, and then just work not really working out for me the way I wanted, life not working out for me the way I wanted it to,
Right.
he was like, "Why don't you just give the gospel a try? You never know, life
Like, what do you
might."
have to lose? Like,
Yes,
you have everything to gain if this is
exactly.
true.
And so in my mind, I said, okay, let's give the church a try to see if my financial situation changes. So I did it for very selfish reasons. I want to give that caveat.
I don't, you know
And
what? And honestly, I don't think Jesus cares. I think he's
right,
just like, we got
right.
him.
Yeah. So my intentions were not altruistic at all.
Uh,
So I was like, okay, let's give it a try. So I started going to church with him. It's not really resonating with me.
right.
And then I hear my buddy talk, and I asked my cousin, I said, hey, this guy invited me to church. Can you come with me?
Yeah.
So him and his girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife, we went to BYU. And I remember walking in, and I'm thinking, like, I mean, I don't know that he's going to say anything that hasn't already been said to me. It's not going to change my view, right?
Right.
I remember sitting down, and he's at the bottom, he's about to start his class, his lesson, and he
Hmm.
looks up and he finds me in the audience, and he big old smile,
Hmm.
and he proceeds to give his lesson. And I felt the spirit. I can't tell you what the lesson was about, but I remember feeling the spirit. And he finished his lesson, class is over. He came up to me, gave me this big old hug, and he looked at me, he said, I cannot believe you came, this is so awesome. And he said, I have something to tell you. Well, I told him, like, that was awesome. Like, thank you so much. That was super cool. And he said, I have something to tell you. I prepared two lessons. I prepared one lesson in case you didn't come, and I prepared a lesson in case you came. And so
Wow.
he gave the lesson in case I came. So it was just so like I was just so touched and so moved by someone who would be willing to do something like that.
Yeah.
And he gives me a Book of Mormon, and I still have that Book of Mormon. And he like, he wrote a little inscription in it, and so he's like, "Here, I want you to have this. Use it, read it." So that kind of starts, the seeds start getting planted. Um, I start reading a little bit, and just things in my mind start changing. Like, okay, well, I don't want to give up this. I don't want to stop doing this, but I'll try a little harder.
Right.
So I start going to church. I'm still drinking. I'm still smoking. I'm still partying. I'm still, with girls and all that. But then little by little, like those things just like I'm like, okay, well, I'll stop drinking. I'll stop smoking. And then the next thing, I'll stop partying. And I remember vividly one time, if I don't know how, maybe you can, if you feel like you need to cut this out, you can, but this is really crucial to my conversion story. Um, one day we went, my other cousin and I went to a party, and we met these girls, and one of them was really drunk, and we went back to their place, and we had a one night stand basically.
Yeah.
And I've done that before, and it wasn't, for me it was just kind of like, oh yeah, I had fun, that was it.
Right.
I remember leaving, and I was outside of her apartment. I didn't know this girl. I've never met her, and to this day I can't tell you her name. I can't tell you what she looks like. She was really drunk, and this feeling just came over me, and I started to weep. Like I just started crying. I'd never felt that before. I just felt so awful. Like I can't believe I just did that to this girl. Like I don't know her, and I don't know. Like it was just the spirit was just so strong, and from that moment I just said, okay, no more. So I credit that bad situation, something that I'm really kind of ashamed of.
Yeah.
That helped me kind of get back in track, like that put me on the right path. And after that, I said, I'm done with this life. I i i stopped smoking, I stopped drinking, I stopped having sex, I stopped that party life, and I started going to church. And it was almost like the change was so instant. Like the I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where your life is a little dark, and then
Yeah.
once you make the right decision, or once you have the Lord in your life, it's kind of like everything just kind of clears up.
It brightens.
It brightens, yeah.
Hmm.
And like just this overwhelming feeling of like desire to read the scriptures came over me, and I started reading the
Yeah.
scriptures. And um I wanted to serve a mission, and I was just like, wow, like this is going way too fast, but I need to embrace it.
Right.
And so I remember talking to my mom, and my mom, she started crying because she was so happy that I was going to church and that I was active again, or that I was,
Yeah.
reactivating myself. And I told her I want to serve a mission, and she was just like, "Oh my gosh," she was so excited. And then I told my brother I wanted to serve a mission, and keep in mind that at the time, a lot of my family didn't understand the gospel, didn't really care about it, and
Right.
so he, instead of him being supportive about it, he was just very like, why? Like, you don't need to serve a mission. You're old. You're too old now. And because at the
Hmm.
time you think like you should do it right out of high school. You're 21. You're going into 22.
Right.
I didn't have my papers, to leave the states. And
Right.
he was like, "What if they tell you you have to go to Mexico and then you can't come back?" So he started throwing all these things,
Yeah.
and that really played with me. And that stuck with me, and so I chose not to go on a mission, um, because at the time they were sending missionaries out of their country of origin. So like
Yeah.
if I lived in the United States, I had to go back to Mexico to serve my mission, and I didn't have that guarantee to come back.
Right.
So because of that, and my, I guess, lack of faith, as you could say, I didn't serve a mission, which is something that I regret. But my wife always tells me like, you don't have to serve a mission to serve a mission. So,
Right.
um, so I try
Well,
to
and
live
I
my,
agree with her. I think she's right
yeah,
too. Because
yeah,
what you're doing right now,
yeah.
it's
Well,
wonderful.
thank you. So, I try to just continue to live my life as best I could. Cool story. Again, got back into the church and I was trying to get my records straight, with the church, and they could not find my baptismal records.
Oh,
I'm
uh-huh.
21 years old, and they cannot find my records inside.
Yeah,
And I was like, my dad baptized me when I was 12. They couldn't find those records. My brother remembers being there.
right. You're
Some
like,
of my
we have a
siblings, yeah,
picture. Here's the
yeah.
picture.
Like, but the funny thing is, my mom doesn't remember. My sisters don't remember my dad baptizing me. So they couldn't find my records. So I ended up getting baptized again at 21,
Wow.
by my
But that
cousin.
was probably really cool though.
Yes, it was. It was super cool because again, again we go back to the whole, Alma and Alma the Younger. It's just like you go through that repentance process of like, oh,
Right.
you see the wrongs, and the Lord gives you an opportunity. Like, hey, you were baptized at 12, you didn't understand what was going on. Your dad probably wasn't even worthy to baptize you, but here's another opportunity. So at 21, I was baptized again,
Yeah.
and like that to me, that was the real time that I got baptized, and yeah, I got a calling as I was a second counselor of the young man in the ward that I was attending,
Uh-huh. You're
and
probably the fun young men's leader
I
too.
was I was because again I'm still not polished. Like I was still pretty rough around the edges. I stopped doing all the bad things, but I still cussed like a sailor, and the cool thing is that it was a young, like our presidency was pretty young. So like
Yeah.
the young man's president, he was in his late 20s. I was in my early 20s. The other guy was in his early 20s. So
Yeah.
we kind of all,
It was like all the
yeah,
bros getting
yeah,
together, man.
exactly. And so, like I listened to music and I had a Jeep and I had like my speakers in the back and like we take the boys everywhere and like I'm over
Yeah.
here bumping Tupac and Eminem and they're all jamming out, and
Yeah.
it was such a fun experience, but I also felt like um I need to be an example. Like
Right.
like the experiences that I've had, I can teach these kids a little bit. So
Right.
that was a cool experience. Fast forward a little bit, and obviously I'm celibate. I'm not having sex anymore.
Hmm.
Like that mindset of like I need to start looking for my wife. I need to start, kind of settling down, and so I begin to hunt, and and I meet this girl, and she was pretty young at the time.
Hmm.
She was also a member of the church, but she really wasn't, like active at all.
Right.
Her dad unfortunately forced her to go to church a lot, um, and so she had a very negative outlook on the church.
Right.
And it was always a constant struggle because I wanted to get sealed in the temple and she didn't want that.
Yeah.
She would tell me like, what if I can't do it? What if I can't, go to church? Or what if I don't want to go to church? How's that going to affect us?
Yeah.
And I was just always like, oh, we got to have faith and we got to do things right. And it was easier for me to say and to think these things, obviously not knowing how deep her scars were. And
Correct.
she was pretty young. Like I said, I was in my mid 20s. I was probably like 23 and she was 18 at the time, almost
Yeah.
19.
Yeah.
And I ended up proposing. We got engaged. I was still hoping that she would eventually come around. Um, we ended up messing up once, and I remember going to my bishop at the time, and he was just like, "Okay, man, like either you get married or you guys break up, because you can't continue this because the next time something worse is gonna happen."
Right.
So here I am thinking I'm a failure because I let God down and I'm not, like all the things that he's done for me at the time, and here I am like a moment of weakness, and mess it all up.
Totally normal.
Yeah.
I've had that moment too.
Right.
Like where
So
you feel like you walk so far and then you're like, oh, now I'm
yeah,
back at ground zero. I just
yeah,
did all
yeah,
this work and the one
yep,
mistake and now I'm back to zero.
yep. And I was just admonishing myself and I'm like, I'm the horrible human being, and
Yeah.
I I remember my mom telling me, "You know what, honey? Like, I know that you really want to get married, but I just don't feel like this is right for you."
Mhm.
And she gave me an analogy that has stuck with me, and my wife and I use it all the time now.
Yeah.
She said, "Right now, you are looking at a shiny ring that you really like, and you're trying to put that ring on, but that ring does not fit, and you're trying to force it down your finger, and all you're going to do is you're going to hurt yourself in the process."
Right.
She said, "You need to find the right ring. You need to fight the right fit. And
Right.
once you find the right fit, you'll know it. This isn't that ring." So,
Wow, that's
yeah.
pretty deep, honestly. It's, like, really interesting.
Yeah, and so that clicked with me, that resonated pretty deeply with me, and so I had a conversation with my at the time, my fiance, and, it was determined she just that this was not the path that she wanted. This was not the life she wanted. So, we ended up breaking up, called the thing quits. I had other girlfriends, nobody really the ring wasn't right,
Right.
and, I was still working in dialogue marketing, and I remember at the time, it was 2007, I went to go get some breakfast at a place called Jason's Deli
Mhm.
at the Orem Mall, and I walked in and I saw this girl, and she just caught my eye, and I caught her eye.
Mhm.
She said that I was like he was really good looking, but he was also ghetto. So,
You're
yeah.
like, "I don't know how to feel about
Yeah,
that."
no, it was good, like, it was
Oh, it was good.
yeah, I mean, if you talk to Andrea, she'll tell you, but,
That's hilarious.
yeah, yeah, I have a little bit of a ghetto swagger to me, but anyway,
Mhm.
uh, so she starts being really flirty or, like, just very talkative and, like, "I know you from somewhere, I know you from," and I just felt like either this girl really thinks I'm cute or
Right. She's
she's just really
crazy.
friendly.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, and so I got my food and I left. And so that I went back to work, and at the time, I had a friend at work with me, and I said, "Hey, I need you to come with me to go get some lunch to Jason's Deli because there's this girl there. I don't know if she's just really friendly or if she's into me, so I need you to tell me."
Yeah.
So we go back, and same thing. She's just super funny and just very talkative towards me. And then she keeps saying, like, you just look so familiar. Have I met you?" And anyway, we
Right.
walked away. My friend said, Yeah, I think that she's either very happy or she might like you. I don't know."
Yeah.
So this was a Friday. Obviously, I was off Saturday and Sunday. And then Monday, I go back to Jason's Deli in the morning. I don't even think they were open yet, but I was just so eager to see her.
To see her, yeah.
Yeah, and I walk in, and there's a girl with her back towards me, and she's got her phone up, like she's talking on the phone, taking an order, but her hair was up and it was curly. The girl that I had met on Friday, her hair was down and it was straight. So I didn't, and she had a different shirt on. I didn't think it was her. So I was like, "Oh well, I'll get something to eat and go on
Yeah.
my way." She turns around and it's her, and like big old smile. And I'm like all excited. I'm like, "All right, cool." So she hangs up, and I'm like, "Hey, I want to get some breakfast." And she's like, "Oh, how you doing?"
Yeah.
And so I'm like, "Okay, this is the moment. Like, I need to throw on that charm." So I I tell her, "Okay, I just want you to know something. I actually had a blueberry muffin because I used to get the blueberry muffins from Costco, and that would take one for breakfast." I said, "I brought a blueberry muffin with me for breakfast, but I gave it away so that I can come here to see you." Um,
Smooth.
right? And as soon as I tell her that, like, she turns bright red, a big old smile, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna
Oh,
get some breakfast!" And she like runs in the back and like
that's
gets,
adorable.
yeah, and and so I write my number down for her because she's at work and I didn't want her to get in trouble. So when she
Right,
comes
right.
back, I hand her my number and I said, "Here's my number. Call me. I don't usually do it this way. I would ask you for your number, but I don't want you to get in trouble because you're at work."
Right.
I said, "Call me, and when you call me, I'll ask you for your number officially." So yeah, I gave her my number. Long story short, we start dating, and we fall in love. And the funny thing is that before our first date, she thought that I was that I. She asked me if I was a member of the church.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Yes." But to her recollection, she remembers me saying that I wasn't active, like that I was a member, but I wasn't active. She had her own issues and her own story,
Right.
growing up and dating somebody who wasn't a member of the church, and just all that, all that stuff that she went through. And she was having second thoughts about it. Eventually, we did go on a date, and it was just magical. Like we clicked.
Yeah.
She's from San Bernardino, California. I'm from Lancaster. We both grew up in the same area. We graduated at the same time. Parents are similar stories. Both of us kind of fell away from the church, but came back. She served a mission. I didn't serve a mission.
Right.
Um, and she helped me a lot. She
Cool.
she helped me because, again, still rough around the edges, still trying to figure things out. I was still doing
Right.
things that I shouldn't be. I
Right.
still, you know, because I didn't know these things. I didn't have that structure, that priesthood holder in my household to teach me these things. So I'm just kind of like learning as I go.
As you go, right.
Yeah, and so she helped me kind of become a better individual. She never told me like, don't do that. She would just say like, maybe you should pray about it. And I would pray about it, and sure enough, like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I
Right.
shouldn't be drinking a chai latte because I used to love coffee.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
Well, and that's cool because it looks like you guys were just more aligned in
yes,
general, right? Like even I think it's really important that it doesn't matter obviously if you're perfect or not. It's two individuals are really truly trying to want to incorporate the gospel and head in the same direction. And I
yes,
think that you were able to find that, and it's awesome when you can say, oh, you can strengthen each other and you can help each other with their weaknesses. And I think
yes.
that that's great. You found your ring. Like that's
I
so
did.
cool.
I found my ring, and she fit me perfectly. And
Did you guys ever figure out where she knew you from?
no,
Or
no, she
or it was just like this one thing that she was just like, you're familiar and
no,
I don't know.
to this day she truly believes that we probably met in the pre-existence. I don't know. Like,
That's adorable.
yeah, she said
I
that
I
she was.
totally believe in that. I totally
Oh
believe in
yeah,
that.
yeah. She was totally smitten, and I was smitten, and it was just great. And
Uh,
yeah, I mean, we've definitely grown together. Like I said, we started dating in 2007, got married by 2008, and it's just been such a wonderful time in my life, and growth, and just spiritual growth, and just personal growth, and just having someone with you that can push you to be better.
right.
um in the gospel, it's just, it's unreal to have such a strong partner in the gospel. And it
Hmm.
makes such a difference, like when you're not having to fight someone because your beliefs are different. um and and to be honest with you, like, all the things that I did, and this is kind of where I was going back in the day when I was doing all these stupid things, and
Hmm.
uh, we can't have kids the normal way. So our daughter is adopted.
Uh,
um and also, I wasn't here legally, so she knew that, and I was able to fix my papers with her. And I remember
wow.
the day we went to get my residency, or for my interview. The person who interviewed me said, she looked at my records, and she asked, like, ever been convicted of anything? You're not divorced, you don't have any other kids or anything like that. And she just asked me all these questions. I was like, no, no, no record. I've never been to jail. No, none of that
Right.
stuff. And she looked at me, and she looked at us, and she said, "I wish that everybody's cases were as clean as yours." And that was one thing. And then being able to adopt our daughter
Uh-huh.
is another reason why I know that Heavenly Father was with me in all those times where I could have really been
Yes.
in trouble. Because
Yeah. With your home study. Nope.
yes, if I had any kind of record, if I had
Yep.
any kind of marks in my past, I don't know that we could have adopted my daughter, because we went through
Right.
LDS church. I mean, went
Right.
through LDS services to adopt my daughter, and
Yeah.
and I don't know that I could have become a resident or a citizen. So again, it just kind of goes to show you that, like, God has a plan for everyone.
Yeah.
And you may not see it at the time. And my wife gives a great analogy, as you have the prophet, and he's like standing up in a tower, and he sees everything.
Right.
We're not able to see everything, so we just kind of have to go by faith.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just it's incredible to me that somebody like me, somebody who's done the things that I've done and has said the things that I've said and felt the way that I've felt, could, come back and be sealed in the temple and have an eternal family and, be a righteous priesthood holder, somebody who I'm the only active male in my family. And, it's tough at times, like it's difficult, but, I wouldn't have it any other way. Um, I love being there for my daughter and my wife and for anybody that needs a blessing or anything like that, things that I never
Right.
had growing up, and again, just going from one of the vilest sinners to I'm not saying that I'm like this, like
I'm
glowing.
pretty positive Alma the Younger wasn't perfect even after his conversion.
Right.
My husband and I were actually having that conversation of, I'm sure there are people who really can just flip on a dime like that and be totally squeaky clean. But I just kind of felt like, I bet after his conversion and his friend's conversion, they probably really struggled still.
Yeah.
And it was really a daily thing where they had to say, like, I'm choosing this.
Yep.
Because even when we have our own personal experiences, we still doubt them
Yep.
sometimes, or we still get tempted
Yep.
sometimes.
Oh, and it's a constant struggle, man. Like,
Yeah.
like I miss coffee. Like I
I
used to
love the
drink
smell of
coffee.
coffee. I can't even drink it because I know I'd be addicted because I love the smell. I love the
Yeah,
smell so much.
I used to drink coffee all the time. I have tattoos and I'm always like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I could have more." And
Yeah,
but, I feel like, I stopped watching certain movies and not that those things are gonna keep me from, going to heaven, but it's always the little things that God asks of us. I don't know why we're not allowed to drink coffee, or we are advised not to drink coffee, I should say.
right.
Um, but, there's a reason. There are higher laws that I don't understand, but
Yeah,
it's the little things that God asks of us. And if we're not able to listen to those little things or follow those little things, how are we supposed to get, into the bigger picture, and how are we supposed to follow the bigger commandments?
right. We literally have
So
no idea how the celestial anything is
exactly.
is set up.
Yeah.
So I
And
think it's
so
good that we have what we have now.
yeah. So it's just I mean, life is great with the gospel. I've lived both ways and
Hmm.
I would never go back.
Yeah,
It's just nice to wake up and not have to worry about, you know, just normal things like, oh, I hope I don't get shot today, or oh, I hope I don't get into some sort of trouble, or I hope I don't get pulled over and, I
right,
have weed in my car, or I'm drunk, or
right.
so many things. So, yeah,
Sweet. Well, I really appreciate your time. This has been so
yeah,
much fun chatting. And do you
cool.
mind just leaving us with a brief testimony before we
Yeah, of
wrap up?
course. I appreciate it. Again, I don't share my testimony that often. I actually don't like testimony Sundays because of it, but it's a great opportunity to say it that I love the gospel. Again, I think my testimony is rooted in the atonement, and just knowing that anybody can come back to Christ no matter how far uh they've gone, or how much we feel that we've messed up. um, no matter how atrocious we think that our sins are or have been, or our actions, or our yeah, just anybody can come back to Christ, and he bled for us, he died for us, and I know that his sacrifice um, has made it so that even people like me can come back and to the fold. He leaves the 99 to go find that one. And so I feel like I'm that one person that he came back to find. And so it just saying it out loud is just kind of like, okay, yeah, like this is my testimony. Just the atonement is real. And again, Satan's a big fat liar. My wife always says that, and I accept that. Like,
I agree.
yeah, he will tell you all the horrible things that you've done, and you'll never be good, and God will never forgive you, but that's not true,
Right,
because God forgives. You just have to forgive yourself. So
right.
yeah, that's my testimony, that God loves and he forgives and he wants you back, and he
Beautiful.
sent his son, and his son will look for you no matter how long it takes. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, for your time tonight. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I appreciate this too. I thank you.
Thanks again for tuning into More Than Coincidence, Remembering Jesus Christ in Your Story. Please follow us on social media or share us with a friend. If you have an experience you'd like to share, feel free to reach out to morethancoincidence.rememberhim@gmail.com. I can't wait to hear all of the amazing memories you all have of our Savior. See you next time.